El radioarte es la inspiración que se le presenta al oyente que escucha a que pueda configurar un escenario propio. Se apela mucho al aspecto subjetivo del radialista, de la persona que elabora esta pieza. Debe ser armónico, es decir, sonar bien. Es un género totalmente libre en su construcción.
Radio art is the invitation that we make to the receiver, the radio listener. Time to influence the space of their own. We appeal to the person who creates the piece, the artist's subjectivity. It has to be harmonic.
Los ingredientes con los que vamos a trabajar son los elementos del lenguaje de la radio. Con música, con efectos, con la voz, la palabra y con el silencio.
It has to sound good. It is a completely free genre when it comes to framework.
Música, con efectos, con la voz, la palabra y con el silencio.
There is no rigid diagram or structure that allow us to design radio art. You're listening to The Noise of the Message.
Para una mejor escucha, recomendamos el uso de auriculares.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
I am Franco.
Hi, Franco and Gerardo.
Hi Agnes, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Yeah, my name is Agnes Hvizdalek. I'm a musician and the managing director of Borealis, Festival for Experimental Music in Bergen, Norway. I grew up in Viena, in Austria, and now I've lived in Norway for 15 years. First I lived in Oslo, which is the capital of Norway, and now I'm based in Bergen, which is the most rainy city of Europe on the west coast of Norway. I use my voice as an instrument, so it's my main instrument is the voice, and I use it both to create the sounds that I like to make music with, and I also I like to think of the voice as a tool for composing and for exploring music and exploring also form and structure in music.
What are your sonic searches when you compose your piece, your work, or when you do live shows or presentations? What are your sonic searches?
Like when it comes to sound, you mean? Like what kind of sounds? I was thinking, because I think music was always very important in my life. So from a very early age, I loved singing and I loved dancing around and I loved listening to music and drowning into music and kind of hiding from reality in music, which is a very cheap and effective thing to do. So, which maybe is also the reason why music as a phenomenon is so popular and it's plays such an important role in so many people, in almost everyone's life, I think. And then I think I also got a bit disappointed very early in my life, like when I was the most honest about what I'm really curious about or interested in or most fascinated about, it was kind of so far away from the options I had. Like when I first started thinking, okay, I would like to sing more and I maybe would like to sing on the stage one day or something. And I thought I need to go to a school and I need to learn singing and need to study music. And then I felt like I had to choose between classical music or jazz music, which were the options that I had at the music school in Vienna, at least. But the things that were going on in my head or where I knew I blew my mind the most, like when I was doing things on my own, those things were very far away from both jazz standards and classical opera singing or things. So I was a bit confused, I think, at that point, maybe also a bit frustrated and maybe a bit young and naive. So, but I kind of decided I won't become a musician. It's like this, that's not a game I want to play. But I kept being very interested and I could not stop doing my own things. And I think that decision to not become or not wanting to become a professional musician and not going that way made me very free. And it made me, or it allowed me to do some, or make some very radical decisions, like what I could be very honest with myself about what I want to focus on. And maybe it's still a kind of adolescence flavor in this position that I have in music, that I kind of decided very early on in my career to really focus on all the things that are outside of the norm and kind of almost try and create a music that proves that it's not enough to think in these boxes. So I had some, let's say, kind of some years where it was very clear to me that that's what I want to do and that's what I have to do, but I was not able to do it really because I had a vague notion about what the sounds are that are really most interesting to me, but I could not, like technically, I wasn't able to do it. So it was a very strange time after school, and I took jazz singing classes and I was singing in a lot of choirs, and at the same time I was attending improvisation classes at the music university in Vienna, and I did not fit in anywhere. So I was jumping in between all those different worlds and trying to stay true to the most honest fascination that I had at the same time. So I was struggling a lot, and it took some years before I both performed and recorded stuff that I was like, okay, that's going somewhere. I don't know if I'm answering your questions, because I think the sounds that I stick to, it's also maybe not so correct in a way now anymore. I'm not the only one who does this, and it's also later I found out more and more, like people who experiment with the voice, they, to a certain degree, you find out similar things, right? And then there is this individual parameter where it's like, for some people, some things are easier to do, and then for others, it's like, depends also a bit on your mother tongue, for example, how your voice works and what is possible for you. But I ended up having some like favorite sounds and like sonic and aesthetic principles that I still work within, and I think that all goes back to that period of my life where I felt like I had to make a very clear decision of what I spent my time on, and I had no or very little motivation to become another good singer who tries to be able to do everything and study everything that already exists in order to maybe one day later be able to make decisions somehow. I kind of got away from being a good student very early. Long answer without answering the question.
No, contraire,
Right.
you did. This feeling of uncertainty you mentioned that is going through maybe almost all of us as teenagers. And I was curious about this willingness to be drowned into music.
I think it was a very easy way to escape, right? It's like if when you don't really agree with things that are going on around you, but you can't really influence, then music is a very effective way of creating your own world within reality, that it's disconnected, but it becomes a part of reality, right? Because you choose to spend time in a certain way and you make the rules. Within our experimental world, you make the rules. So I think that's where my music comes from, for sure, from that time, that approach. And also my understanding of improvisation is based on I decide what I do.
What kind of things were you listening to at that time?
A very interesting question, which is maybe also connected to the sense of confusion that I had at that time. Maybe it's worth saying or mentioning that I was playing classical violin for many years, and I grew up attending opera almost every week together with my grandmother, and she taught me a little bit piano and allowed me to make the noises I wanted to make without ever complaining, which I think influenced me a lot too. And I was not super interested or super fan of what was popular music at that time. So I was a bit an outsider at school. To begin with, I was not interested in popular music, but I could not honestly say that I'm a fan of any of the Spice Girls. Maybe I did listen to the Spice Girls. I did listen to pop music too, but I think I grew up listening to a lot of different kinds of music. And also when I started working for a concert organizer when I was 16, I got the chance to attend so many different kinds of concerts. So I was almost addicted to experiencing live music from a very early age, and I had this very unique opportunity to also do so without spending a lot of money, because I was working for one of the biggest concert organizer of Austria. So I could experience both Vienna Symphony Orchestra and jazz music and experimental music, highest quality in the best venues in Vienna every week. So I think this influenced me a lot, that I had I found a way to experience a lot of different kinds of music from a very high quality and alive, that I could really also experience the people who create this music, and that I both got to see how great they are, but that I also got to see that they are human beings and that they are not from another world, and that they also are a bit strange and weird and human in all its variety. I think that influenced me a lot.
Great. Yeah, and weirdness is absolutely human, of course.
Yes. Especially with musicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
to ask you about the influence of noise and silence in your work.
Well, it's a scale, right? It's there is no absolute noise and there is no absolute silence, like technically. I do like silence a lot. I sometimes can enjoy silence more than listening to music, and I'm also able to enjoy noise as music. So I think both play a very important role in the music I like and the music I like to make, especially because I think contrast is very important to create tension and to amplify the statements you want to make. I've made both very calm and very slow and very silent pieces, and I've also spent quite some time in my life playing and performing at noise festivals, and putting myself into situations that I did know how to deal with, like acoustically. And then also some of the techniques, if you want to put it like that, come from me performing in noise concerts without knowing how how I would do that, and was like just coming up, or things just happened because I had to be loud. It's like all these almost yodeling techniques, they just happened. That did not happen in an isolated rehearsal room situation, but it happened in noise concerts, performing together with electronic musicians or with a noise orchestra or things like that. It's like out of necessity.
It's interesting because your instrument is your voice.
Yes.
And it's a very different art. All our instrument, your body is the instrument.
Yeah. I think it's also that I think that happened at that time. Like, okay, I realized that it's a lot of things are allowed when you play an instrument or when you play electronics. There are so many kinds of noises and sounds that are allowed, and that where it's like it's enough to play a sine wave. But if you are a vocalist playing one tone or singing one tone, that's super weird. It's like even more weird than someone performing with a laptop on stage and playing very minimalistic and reduced music. And I think that was part of this idea or this package, like, okay, now if I spend time with music, then I want to make this statement. And if it's allowed with other instruments, why shouldn't it be allowed with the voice too? And I still most of the sounds, if you really analyze it, it's not virtuosic or anything at all. It's a lot of breathing sound and a lot of very plain tones and anti-virtuosic even.
Yes, great thoughts on that, really. I was wondering, since you mentioned live performance as a sort of a key element, not only in your aesthetic, but also in aesthetic decisions, but also your life. Was there any conflict when you started recording things or listening to your pieces recorded or your voice recorded?
I almost forgot about it because it's so long time ago, but I was...
Okay, I tell one anecdote from last week.
Because
no one knows that yet, so this is very new information.
Because also my life is changing a lot right now because I have this new job working for Borealis and kind of committing also to the responsibility I have for that festival and also what it means for the whole scene, right? I think it's very important that organizations like that have the stability that the smaller organizations never have. So when I said yes to that job, or also when I applied, it was very clear to me that I won't be a performing artist like I've been the last 10, 15 years. So I was kind of joking a bit when people asked me about it, that it's like, now I'm becoming a hobby musician. It's like, that's what I'm doing on the side from now on. And I won't have the capacity to challenge myself artistically in the same way that I've done previously. And there was some amount of grief connected to that decision, but at the same time, it felt very, very right, because I know that I've been working towards a job like that for a very long time. And I've studied cultural management. I've never really officially studied music. So it feels very right for me to take that step. Also, when it's somehow sad, at the same time, it's not sad at all. I've done so many strange things, and I've had so many opportunities to develop my music and to strengthen my voice and find my position. And I think I completely take this as a strength also into this more bureaucratic kind of job, that I know what it means to me, and I know partly at least what it means to other people, that I've done that work and that I know what I'm working for. So last week, as I'm now in a slightly different mode when it comes to my own music, that I allowed my colleague to challenge me to use electronic devices for the first time to manipulate my voice, which is something that I've tried, but I've never really done that, and I've never felt the need to do that. There are so many other vocalists who are good at that, and there are so many other people who are not vocalists who are also very good at it. I don't need to be one of them. I feel most comfortable being the one doesn't do it, and I focus on my project, and that's enough.
It's difficult enough, and which is true.
And now I'm more like, okay, I don't care so much right now. So I have gotten my first effect boxes that I use to manipulate my voice in one of my projects. And when I went to the first rehearsal, I was like super excited. And I met another colleague who remembered, and I told him, like, today is the day and it's happening. And he reminded me of one rehearsal I had together with him more than 10 years ago, where he suggested that he could manipulate my voice with some effects. And I explained to him, like, in a very cold way, that that's not going to happen. So it was a very long detour now, but it's loosening up right now.
El ruido es el mensaje.
You know, it's really interesting when you start. It turned out that you had to make your own way towards this. And maybe when you're in that kind of position, you start overthinking what's going around you. You feel a lot of concerns about integrity. So loosening up, as you say, it's much more difficult. And not only difficult, but also you feel on the verge of betraying something or yourself or someone. But it's so relieving when it does happen. And when you say, I'm able to go forward without feeling or without compromising that. So
yeah, I don't know if it's getting better from now on. We will see. But it just feels right to do things differently now. And when it comes to the recording versus the live, I think the reason why I was so interested in, or I am still most like the music experiences that mean the most to me in my life, they are definitely concert situations where experiencing music live performed by the people who create it in a venue together with other people. That's for me always and will always be the most intense and potentially mind-blowing situation. And that time when I was so strict about the manipulation of the voice, I was not interested in recording. I was also not so into performing, actually. As I'm connected to this, I did not see myself, or I did not understand myself as a professional musician for a very long time, which was a bit weird because it's not so long time ago that I understood that's what I am, because I'm making a living and I'm doing all the things professional musicians do. But I never felt at home on a stage. I still don't really enjoy performing. It's like I love music and it means a lot to me, but it's not performing for other people is not the moment where I get a lot of energy from. And I know from colleagues that there are people who are able to feel that way. they get a lot of energy from performing and getting applause and being in this situation. I'm not one of those people, and I've never been, and I'm more relaxed about it now, but it's traditionally I like to make music, but I like to talk to people about it, and I like to share it also and thoughts around it, but it's maybe a bit tricky. But I got used to both performing and recording, and listening to my own stuff is actually the way I rehearsed and learned the most. But I did this in the beginning only for myself. I recorded and listened and analyzed it the same way I would analyze other people's music, which was very painful in the beginning, but it was extremely effective also. Getting used to hearing myself and to finding a constructive way of giving feedback to myself and developing things.
I want to ask you about your curatorial process, because now you are the head of one festival, and one important festival in Europe of experimental music. So, I am a journalist, but I am an artist too. Gerardo is an artist too. So, we are in the other side of the street.
In the other side? You're from curating, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, you are curating a radio broadcast, no, aren't you?
Yes.
You're making decisions on whom to include and whom to exclude, and in which order to put them, and which questions to ask is very similar.
Yes.
I think we are all curators in some way, and maybe it's important or good to just be precise that as I said in the beginning, I'm the managing director of Borealis now, and it's a co-directorship. So there is an artistic director, my colleague Peter Meanwell, who also is a journalist, by the way. And so the curation and the program, that's on his table. My job is to keep that organization alive and to make sure everything around works well and that the team works well together. And the program is curated by Peter. And I'm very happy about that. Maybe to answer that question about my personal approach to curating, I curated the festival, the Music Unlimited Festival in Austria last year, which was somehow very different situation, because it's a festival that's curated by the association themselves every second year, and in the years in between they invite one artist that they like to make the program instead of them. But in that case, it means it's a very personal curation, right? So it's my name on the poster, it's my face on the poster. Everyone knows that I made these decisions, and it's only one time. So it's not like for 20 years, it's only Agnes Hvizdalek and her friends, which
anyway would not be good, in my opinion.
It was a very nice challenge to do that, and also to be aware that that's not the same as running a festival for a long period of time. And also as a performer or as a musician, when I go and participate in other people's programs and festivals, I experience it's a big difference if I'm invited by someone who is really a fan of my music or of me as a person, and who invites me because they really want me to be there, And sometimes it's, I've also experienced to be invited somewhere because of almost the opposite, where it's the people who organize or make the program, they like different kinds of things. And then they realize it's maybe not enough, it's not broad enough, and it's maybe not female enough, and it's maybe not experimental enough, and it's maybe not young enough. And for some years, I've almost felt like that was my job, to be like the one extra person that is younger, female, more crazy than everyone else. And I think that was a very difficult and hard job to do, but I understood that I can do it. And I also, to a certain degree, I enjoyed being that person, or at least sometimes I was able to enjoy it, not always. But it's a big difference. That's what I wanted to point out now, that's if you are invited because of who you are or despite of who you are. And that's why I think it's also very interesting to be aware of who is making decisions and what are the decisions based on. Is it like really honest? That's what the person also likes, or is it what is right to do? And I think both is really important. And also when I curated or made the program for the Unlimited Festival, I think it was also important to me to not only invite people that I already knew and that I felt really safe about. I had some rules, like I won't invite people where I know they can be invited by the festival themselves anyway. So I pissed off quite a lot of people because they expect I know that they know that I like them and that I would have had many reasons to invite them to my festival edition, but I didn't, because I knew that they will be invited by the festival themselves later anyway. They did not need me to invite them. So, and it was really important to me to also challenge myself a bit and to give some space for risk, or like, okay, I invite those people and that seems like a cool idea, but I don't really know, it's like it can go wrong and it can happen that I don't really like what they play. But it was very important to me to give some space in the program for things like that where I was not sure yet, but I just followed a feeling or an impulse. I think I even had a number system for myself, like a proportion, like, okay, half of the people came from that list. When you get this opportunity, then you spend I think I spent one train ride writing a list of the people that came to my mind. That takes 2-3 hours, and then you go you feel so cool because you know all these people and they do all this different stuff, and you imagine this beautiful festival already. And it was not in the end it was not so different from that first draft, right? But I think taking that time to not stay with the really first draft and challenge yourself and challenge the people around you to go one step further, I think this is super important, and what makes the program really good then too.
Yes. A very, very important answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Concerning that aspect of curation and this curatorial choices, and on this kind of fringes, like dealing with experimental music, do you have a concept of that as such? Do you have a definition of experimental music? If so, there are some people that say that they don't. There are some musicians that say that, and I kind of tend to agree with them in the sense that the experimental music is more like an opportunity or a window to mix things up. So they talk about experimentation in music.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Two things. The one is the definition of what is meant by experimental music depends on the context in which this term is used in, right? So why can I describe my own music as being experimental when I've been doing the same thing in different variations, okay, but still for a very long time, since before I even knew that this is a thing. And the other thing is, and that's maybe the most useful thing for us now, is and also when it comes to running an organization, that give stability to that field. What is an organization or a festival for experimental music? Why is doing, and why is that important that it exists, and what does it mean then? And I think it has, no matter if we now use it as a genre term or as like is relevant in all genres, which is both true and false at the same time. I think it's a specific function that it has in music, both for us now, but also over time. There are always things that are outside of the mainstream, outside of the norms, and or people and kinds of music that try and push and work really like on the edges of what is normal or perceived as normal and what is established right now. And there are so many different ways of dealing with that and doing that, right? It can be purely technically, it can be purely aesthetically, it can be how it's organized, it can be by combining different worlds or genres. Like, there is so many ways of being experimental in music. And for me, as I go into this role as co-director of Borealis, for example, now I think it's very important to stay open. Like there are, and acknowledge that there are many different ways of being experimental, and then that all those ways of pushing boundaries and challenging how things are today is valuable, and also accept that it's often difficult to recognize like how it's experimental and how it's important for the future of music, and just be in it, be like endure all these challenges. And so I think that the function that it has for in the bigger picture, I think, is most important to me.
Wow, thank you very much.
It seems that the questions and possible answers are limitless, so
yeah.
I enjoy a lot asking this kind of questions, because it seems that they sort of open up some new windows and bloom into something different. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for asking the questions. It's important to be asked like directly from time to time, because it's so central to what we work with, and then we take it for given, right? That we know what we are dealing with, and then formulating it or putting words, finding the precise words to describe is not so easy.
Yeah, and because it's so unattainable sometimes. Fantastic.
Okay.
El ruido es el mensaje.
it's the first time in years or decades that I come across a festival that boldly says it's about experimental music. And it's so open in terms of approach and...
Yeah, it's. I'm happy you say that because it was the same for me, actually. I can tell you 2 anecdotes about why it's important that there are visible organizations that are a statement in themselves. And then I thought, if you want to play music from the festival that takes place in 2024, I would like to tell you a bit more about Elina Våge-Michaelsen, because she is our artist in residence since last year, or since this year and next year. And she is a Sami artist and has gathered a lot of musicians and artists and sound artists who have an experimental approach to music and combine it with their Sami heritage. And right now there is huge protest and a lot of actionism taking place in Norway because of a human rights case that the Norwegian state, or that is against the Norwegian state, who put up the wind power in reindeer area in northern Norway. So it's quite intense period, and just right last week they had a gathering in Tromsø, and it's so touching what these people are doing now, both for themselves and on an individual and artistic level, but also for us and for music, and the way it's so connected to their lives and their history and their backgrounds and the political situation that's right now, and the music and the way of expressing who they are in an artistic way. It's so touching, and it's a so good and strong example for why it's important that we meet these people and that we get to know the people behind the art, because I have very little knowledge about Sami art and culture, for example, and I would have not come to my mind easily, and I have not listened to a lot of that music, and I did not know that I could like this kind of music. But when I attended this event last year or this year at the last festival, it was so touching, and it did not matter if I thought I liked that kind of music, but it was an extremely strong experience to be there and experience their works together with them. So I would really like to play a piece by her. I will send you something. And then the 2 anecdotes, because the first time I went to Norway was to visit another festival, which was the All Ears Festival for improvised music, which after 3 years of taking improvisation classes in Viena and experimenting and being in my own little crisis, I had not seen or didn't know any other organization or festival that was presenting improvised music of many different kinds. So at that time it was run by people like Maja Ratje and Paul Nielsen Love and Lasse Marhaug, and people who have very different approaches, like both noise and jazz and also classical backgrounds, and they were doing this festival together. It was so inspiring for me. And I was 21 years when I attended that festival, and half a year later I moved to Oslo. And then almost something quite similar happened with Borealis, because I moved to Bergen because of Borealis 3 years ago, because I took part, or I was selected, and then I took part in a mentoring program that they have for young composers. And I have always known that I'm not the kind of musician that is only interpreting other people's music, because I have not spent much time doing that the last 10-15 years. But for me, there was no room to, and also no reason to call myself a composer, just because I create music, which is somehow, you know what I mean, but at the same time, it's also very weird. But that's because of history and how we use the term composer and what we learn at school, what a composer is and what the job is, and that somehow we almost forget that people are creating music today too, and that could be okay to call people who create music composers, also if it's very different somehow or potentially very different way of creating music than 100 or 200 or 500 years ago. And Borealis was the first festival that managed to define the role of the composer in a so open way that I felt I could apply there. I could be a composer in the way I want to be a composer. So it's kind of changed. It's a very simple thing somehow. It's like just how you define a word, but it's a bit cheesy maybe, but it did change my life. I moved to another place, and I felt very challenged, and found out it's not so different from what I've been doing my whole life, but it was challenging at the same time to try and again fit in somewhere where I don't really belong, like traditionally. But I'm very happy I did it. And I'm extremely happy that I get to work for an organization like that. That means so much long term for how music is perceived and how it's created, and how also which role it plays in society, right? Because it's we who like to experiment with things and to kind of be active outside of the established norms and boxes. We are used to not being visible in the mainstream culture, right? And in media, and just we do our own things, and we try hard to stay alive and stay happy enough to be able to continue. But in the long run, I think it's super important that it's what is done in the arts and in experimental music is visible. Also for people who are not experts and who are not especially interested in doing that themselves. I think there are many people who are very happy that they don't have to work with it, and at the same time they could be happy that someone else is doing it. So I think that's the reason, for me at least, where I think it's so important that we also have bigger organizations and well-established organizations that also are able to survive long-term and get this kind of visibility, and also open up spaces where people can experience some parts of it and get an idea of why it's interesting and why it's important and why it's exciting that takes place also if it's not mainstream, and not everyone has to love it or like it or listen to it while they wash their dishes or something.
Wow.
Standing ovation.
It's so cute.
Well, the last minute, sorry.
I mean, for me, we can have some more minutes. I don't want to stress you. I don't know how it's for you.
And we will continue whole day and the whole week.
Of course.
If possible.
Before the communication cut, we want to thank you, really. Thank you very much for being here in our program.
From the bottom of our hearts.
Yes.
It means a lot to us too, that you reach out from the other side of the world. It's very touching.
Thank you very much, Agnes.
Yeah. Good luck with the festival and keep going, really. Opening doors for us and for everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
El ruido es el mensaje.
Vamos por más, dice la rana, escúchame, ¿eh? Esto recién empieza.